Do comic books still have the power to surprise us despite reboots and new universes with the same characters? Greetings to everybody. I hope your day is going well. Before we get started with our video for today, I want to sincerely thank everyone for their support of our channel and let you know that we will keep trying to make the better content possible. Without any more comment, let's get to the video for today. Can we still be surprised by comics after all these years? After all, despite existing in several parallel worlds and having through numerous reboots, they are always the same characters. Every comic reader has a point in time when they question if it is still worthwhile to read comics. I hasn't suddenly become bored with this pastime or become weary of the things that used to make it so joyful. It is a different subject, but not quite so cold. Marvel Comics has a long history of successful crossover events, and they recently hinted that Heroes Reborn, a 25-year-old reboot idea, would be brought back to revive the Marvel Universe in comic books. Due to the fact that these characters were relocated from the Marvel Universe to a new one, where their narratives would begin from fresh, Heroes Reborn was an attempt to restart the Iron Man, Captain America, Fantastic Four, and Avengers collections. In addition to being a short setback for Marvel Comics stage in the late 1990s, this event was also a financial failure. Marvel has now revealed that it will launch this event in some form or another in order to relaunch the world and give fresh life to characters with low sales or whose stories have finished, like Venom, whose stage was cut short in the most recent crossover event, King in Black, the present status with Heroes Reborn at Marvel Comics. For over 4 years, Marvel Comics has maintained a steady stream of crossover events, including Secret Empire, War of Realms, Empire, and King in Black. These crossovers have delighted not only the most ardent readers, but also the new ones brought in by the success of the MCU in theaters. For this reason, a macro event in which the comic book universe is restarted is an excellent commercial strategy, as all the new comic book enthusiasts could do so without encountering any difficulties. Do you anticipate this crossover event? Or do you believe they'll make the same errors they did 25 years ago? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section of our YouTube channel. Meanwhile, 10 years have gone since Dan Didio and Jim Lee orchestrated DC Comics' major relaunch. The first issue of Justice League by Jeff Johns and Jim Lee, released on the same day as the 5th issue of Flashpoint, the summer event of that year that transformed the DC Universe forever, was published 10 years ago. The New 52, a relaunch planned by Dan Didio and Jim Lee with the goal of updating DC Comics icons for the modern era, merging that fictional universe with the Wildstorm label, and bringing back the DC characters who had been under the Vertigo label for many years, began with that number, ahead of the relaunch of another 51 titles that would arrive in September of 2011. Everyone was affected by this contentious and historically significant movement. The audience, reviewers, and authors all responded to the New 52 in equal measure. DC marches, leaks, and contentious pronouncements were hot topics week in and week out, while the comics themselves struggled to find their place in the new continuity, which was both unique and shifting. With this new status in mind, we go back to our experience as readers. Every comic book reader experiences the feeling, pardon the repetition, that he is constantly reading the same narrative at some point in his life. It has the same sense as going in circles on a familiar path. You are aware that you are lost yet are certain that you won't be lost at all. Us all have experienced this. I know because it has occurred to me, and I have questioned other comic book readers about if it is a common occurrence or just my problem. It appears to be the latter. Every comic book fan eventually comes to the realization that the characters are the same in all the reboots and new realities. Then those circle turns make you feel uncomfortable and momentarily out of place, and what was once your comfort zone has lost whatever charm it once had since it has become regular. With superhero comics in particular, it's simple to lose that passion. There are many years and decades of continuity, several parallel storylines, a wealth of information, numerous comparable stories and story cycles, and so forth. Everything can be identified. And that's okay, nonetheless, no. It's okay when you first start reading and you start to piece together your own cosmogony, when you start to comprehend illusions because you've read the previous 100 comics and now you know what a word or phrase means, what a villain's appearance means, or when a hero who has been reincarnated is already there. However, after reading comic books for a while, you start to find other universes or directly self-contained stories, and you start to view those heroic universes through new lenses. You consider them and ponder them. Do they justify it? This reading crisis, there is no such thing as a reading crisis, but it sounds fantastic, must be a natural aspect of reading comics since, as I said, it hasn't only occurred to me. Perhaps a lot of those that view this channel regularly have also gone through something similar. There was a time when I believed I had lost interest in superheroes. One of my favorite superhero, Spider-Man, was the comic I was reading at the moment. When I was done, I set the comic down on the desk and thought to myself, what a waste of time. I would have rather to do something except read that comic. My heart sunk as I observed the impressive stack of comics, another masterpiece for fans and collectors. Just considering how much time it took me to read everything. I sunk. The answer came to me from my mind. I instructed me, don't read them. It's not required, I repeat. It was genuine. Not my work, although my pastime was supposed to be. If I didn't feel like reading all that, I didn't have to. No one compelled me to. In preparation for what would happen later, I noted the titles and put them on a shelf as I waited to regain my love. It was, in fact. I went far longer than I had anticipated without reading a comic. I gave up reading comic books and concentrated on other pastimes and endeavors. Literature, movies, television, video games, and music. It was just as enjoyable for me as comic books. It wasn't that I was too old for comics, as I had feared. There was a moment when a Batman comic was watching me from one of my bookcases. I cannot recall the title. I do recall that the comedy was excellent. I took it, read the back cover, nodded, smiled, and so on. I ate it up. He sentenced the narrative and returned back that to-do list in only 30 minutes. I enjoyed reading all of the information and spent several weeks doing so. Then I understood what had occurred. As if it were a race against time, I had given in to the craziness and voracity of reading comics for the sheer sake of doing so. I had lost myself along the line and blamed the comics when it was actually and solely my fault and responsibility. Walking away from them caused me to stop doing what I was doing, and in doing so, I was reminded of how comic books can make me dream, transport me to locations that are only shown in the panels, and evoke feelings in me that can only be brought on by the scent of ink on paper. Reboots, new worlds, or the same characters are not the issue. We are the issue. A youngster will be startled if he picks up a comic book for the first time. Thus, comics continue to have the power to surprise us. Therefore, the issue is not the comic substance, but rather the viewpoint from which it is read. A story's power to surprise the reader comes from both the author's, writer and cartoonist, and the reader's own efforts. After all, telling a tale involves a connection between the communicator and the listener, just like speaking does. So, yeah, we can still be surprised by comics. All we have to do is let them do it rather than looking to cartoons to make up for the lost innocence and blaming comics for the passing of time. We appreciate you visiting our comic books and pop culture channel. For more exclusive news, scoops, and unique information, subscribe to Uncanny Collectibles.